Very good. Okay, well, welcome to our 19th episode in our Lunch and Learn series. And it's our 5th in the 2021 field season Lunch and Learn series. We have a really big group today, watching the ticker go up past 100 right now as people come in. And that's so wonderful. We see that this is a very hot topic for folks, and we want to give a shout out. I don't know if he's on yet. I'll wait for the shout out and see if he shows. So we began these webinars to create a space for us to come together and look at how different industry professionals are using new technologies to streamline problematic compliance tasks. Today we have a very special guest with us from Southern California Edison. She's here to talk about compliance with the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, MBTA, for construction projects, and I'll introduce her in a minute. We really hope to bring you value, and a big part of that is if you ask questions, because the other people in the seminar, in the Lunch and Learn, will learn from that as well. So please ask questions. You can do it in the chat, or you can do it in the Q&A box, we would really love to hear even feedback. You don't even have to just ask questions, but if you've got a way that you've solved the problem that's come up in the presentation, then please also share that. So my name's Kristen Hazard. I'm the founder and CEO of Wildnote. And Wildnote is a compliance automation platform built specifically for environmental consultants, permittees, and regulators. We lovingly call them the RPCs. So today at the end, we will demonstrate the power of this platform for active construction compliance. And we see our customers utilizing the platform for active construction compliance with SWIP, bird nest monitoring, straight up compliance reporting that could be daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, and spill and other activities that might happen in an active construction project. So that's the cool thing about the power of a platform. It's not hard-coded, and you can bend it to your will, essentially. So just wondering, if you see a bunch of projects coming your way, technology can help with that by allowing you to accomplish more with less staff. And from what I hear, it's quite a staffing crunch going on right now. So we think technology can help. So with me today is our Director of Customer Success, Nancy Douglas.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see the familiar people on the list and some new folks as well. Welcome.
And she will definitely be doing the demo at the end, showing our active construction compliance, including our bird nest monitoring module. And also with us is Rini Punzi, one of our amazing sales reps. All right, thanks, Rini. So quick housekeeping, please use the chat window to interact and post questions for the panel. Please use the Q&A window for technical questions or if you need help during the webinar. And if you have not completed the poll, which I have not launched. Okay, now I've launched the poll. So you should have a little pop-up there, and please fill that out as we go. Yeah, so if you've not completed the poll yet, please take a moment. All right, so shout out to Chris Garza. I see he's here now. And he's of Terracon, and he was interested in gaining a better understanding of what they could incorporate into their business in order to offer Migratory Bird Treaty Act compliance as a service. And we were fortunate enough to get in touch with Cara Donohue to talk about this. Cara is the Avian Program Manager for Southern California Edison, focused on compliance with the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act, and state and federal endangered species acts while maintaining grid reliability. She is also a past chair of the Avian Powerline Interactions Committee, a collaborative group made up of electric utilities partnering with wildlife resource and land management agencies and environmental NGOs. Cara received a BS in anthropology zoology from the University of Michigan and a master's in raptor biology from Boise State University. Welcome, bird nerd.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
I've never been called that before.
Oh, okay. All right. So we will start today with our stories from the field, and we love to have our guests just kind of casually warm us up with a funny, adventurous, crazy, whatever you got story from the field. What do you got, Cara?
This one's definitely, hopefully, funny and embarrassing. So this is back in when I was 20 years old and still in college, and it was my first field biology job. And I was doing nest searching for birds in northern Michigan. And I'm in a swamp, and I sit down with my back up against a tree to write down my notes. And as I'm sitting there, I see this porcupine walking towards me, and I'm like, oh, cool. You know, I get to just watch this porcupine for a little while, and never seen one up close, being from a city. And so the porcupine, though, it keeps on walking towards me, and it's not turning, and it doesn't seem to notice me. So I'm just being really still and quiet. But then it walks right up to me, and it puts its paws on my boots like it's going to climb me to climb the tree.
Oh boy.
And at this moment, I'm thinking about what little I know about porcupines, which came from cartoons.
Right.
And I'm like, oh my God, this thing is going to shoot its quills at me. I'm going to die. Or is it going to shoot them strong enough to break through my glasses and injure my eyes? You know, all sorts of crazy thoughts. And so I take a little breath in to try and let it know that there's a person there instead of a tree. And its quills all raise up on its back, and I'm like, oh, this is it. And then all of a sudden it just like lowers its quills and turns and walks away.
Okay.
I breathed a sigh of relief. And then when I later was back with my coworkers and told them the story, they all had a good laugh over the fact that I thought that porcupines could shoot their quills.
Oh, they can't?
No.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's
Very
awesome.
embarrassing.
Yeah. I've never ran into a porcupine before. Have you? Have either of you, Reedy or Nancy?
I've seen them from afar, yes, and I kept it that way because I thought they could shoot them too, to be honest.
Oh, good.
It's all really new.
You're not alone. And I worked for my dad as a veterinarian, and I cannot tell you how many times we had dogs come in with porcupines that had to be pulled out.
Oh,
So
yeah.
those dogs sure thought that the porcupines could shoot the quills. Like,
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks for that. That's a great story. Next thing we go in the segments is the problem solve segment. And Cara was kind enough to actually create a presentation for us to get us our learning on about the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. So she's going to share her screen and go into her presentation.
All right. So you guys all see the presentation?
yes.
All right, great. Yeah, so I'm just going to give you a little bit of background on what the Migratory Bird Treaty Act means to energy projects. And let's see if I can get it to advance. For some reason, the arrow's not working. All right, there we go. Okay, so MBTA, I'll tell you a little bit about what MBTA is, what it means to the electric utility industry, and then how we comply with it on our energy projects. So it's an old law, 1918, and it pretty much just protects birds. Their parts, you know, feathers, bones, every part of a bird is a protected thing. Their nests are protected, and they're protected from what's called take. And they define take as the pursue, hunt, shoot, wound, kill, trap, capture, or collect. But to an electric utility, it's pretty much the wound and kill part that we're most interested in. And so it protects their nests, the eggs and chicks, not only from a direct impact, if you were to actually destroy an active nest has eggs or chicks, but also indirect impact. So if you're working near a nest and you cause the parents to abandon, or you cause the eggs or chicks to die from exposure to the elements, that's also take under MBTA. It's administered by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And so related to that indirect impacts, it's currently interpreted to protect birds from incidental take. So otherwise lawful activities like running an electrical infrastructure If we cause birds to incidentally die from our activities, then that's incidental take. And there's a lot of story behind whether MBTA covers incidental take or not. There's court cases on both sides of it. It's been interpreted differently in the past administration compared with the current one, but it's heading towards Fish and Wildlife Service developing a permit program for incidental takes. So looks like we'll stick with that interpretation for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So within the electric utility industry, there's a few different ways that we're dealing with MBTA. So electrocution, sometimes birds make contact with our energized wires and get electrocuted. They can also fail to see the wires up in the air and collide with them. If you're interested in learning more about those two things, the Avian Power Line Interaction Committee is a great resource for how those things happen, as well as how you mitigate them. And you can find them at applic.org. But we're going to focus on nesting. Yeah.
Like, so if a bird literally touches one of those lines, is that it? It's fried?
No, that's a good question, right? We all see birds perching on the wires all the time with no problem. And that's because they're just on, and I'm not going to get too technical here because I'll go past my abilities as a bird biologist, but if they're just sitting on one wire, the electricity just keeps flowing and it doesn't cause any harm. But if they can make a connection with another energized wire, that will cause the electricity to jump between the wires. Or if they touch an energized wire and touch something that's grounded. That can take electricity to ground, then the bird will get electrocuted. Okay. So nesting birds, they nest on our infrastructure, and they also just nest in the general area of our lines. So we deal with nesting birds on both our operations and maintenance side of our activities, as well as on our projects, building large transmission lines and things like that.
I've seen another nesting bird or compliance webinar, and they seem to nest in the craziest spots sometimes.
Yes, they do. Yeah. Yeah, we've had on one of our projects, somebody left the windows down on a truck over a weekend, and the glove box was either open or torn out, and a bird built a nest in the glove box. You know, I've seen all sorts of crazy things just in my company, but then of course on the internet, there's all sorts of interesting places.
Right.
Birds build nests. Yeah. So on our operations and maintenance work, our O&M work, we don't typically have agencies overseeing that work. And so it's not a requirement to do anything more than prevent take of the nest. So we can't cause the nest to fail. So that gives us a lot of opportunities to look at the situation that any given nest is in. And this is where it's really important for me to depend on our consultants that we use, that they have lots of experience working in an electric utility setting and our type of work, as well as really experienced avian biologists, because I'm the only avian biologist at Edison, so I can't do all of our work. So we need our people out in the field to be able to interpret the situation. How long is the work going to take? How close is the work to the nest? What species are we dealing with? What are the tools that we need to use? Is the nest eggs or is it chicks? Is the weather really bad, or is it 70 degrees and perfect out? So any of those things can factor into how close that work can occur to a nest. And this photo here is from a pole that we needed to string wire on. And so that nest location that's shown there is actually a traveler for hooking the wire into those insulators. And a kingbird built the nest, their nest on that traveler. So work was halted because we really couldn't do any more with that nest there, but we found that this pole actually had some fractures near the location that the arrow is pointing at, some stress fractures. And this pole was in a parking lot. So we were worried about the structure falling apart with the public safety hazard occurring. And so regardless of the nest, we really just had to fix the emergency situation. But what's amazing about the birds is sometimes they're a lot more tolerant than you're going to expect them to be. And so this nest, there was chicks in it, and we did the work 15 feet away from the nest and made the situation safe for the public while the birds kept feeding their chicks. So something you might expect them to just give up and not come back and those chicks to die, they actually tolerated the situation really well. So and that actually happens a lot with certain species in our territory. So it's really important for our avian biologists to be aware of the different species and their tolerances in different circumstances.
That's a great story. It's like win-win. Everybody's happy.
Yeah, it was very cool. I was very happy that worked out so well. On our larger projects, things tend to be different. So in these situations, we'll have consultants that are preparing our application for permits or are drafting our environmental documents for the agencies. And we almost always have the need for a nesting bird measure in there to show that we're going to comply with MBTA. And in the past, it was really common for people to not be paying close attention to this, and we would end up with measures coming back in our permits that would require us to have a 300-foot buffer for birds in general and 500 feet if it was raptors. And no activity could occur within those buffers if we had an active nest. And if that was all that the measure said, then we had no wiggle room there. We just couldn't conduct any work within that buffer, which really made it very restrictive. And if you think about an urban area or a suburban area, say you've got a house finch nest on your block and you can't work within 300 feet of that, that's actually kind of ridiculous given how far that is and how much activity is occurring in that environment anyhow. Mm-hmm. So it's really important for us that folks are looking for these things in our documents, that our consultants are looking out for us and making sure that we get the best language in there that gives us flexibility to adjust to the circumstances each active nest is in and make a good judgment as to whether that bird can sustain a smaller buffer than that starting buffer that it's been given. So this doesn't always work out. Sometimes we have smaller agencies, especially, or other entities that don't have as much experience working on these types of projects, and they just give a flat seasonal restriction. You cannot work during the breeding season, which for us in California, that could be as early as January to as late as the end of October with acorn woodpeckers. So not a lot of time to get your work done in. And I'm sure if you're in Minnesota, you feel the same way with like nesting season's probably May to August, and then it's snowing the rest of the year. So,
yeah, the work season.
So really important. Yeah, really important to have folks that recognize these things and can catch it for you and work with the agencies to get something more flexible and reasonable. Mm-hmm. It does tend to require, though, that we be more conservative on these projects. With the agency oversight, they're going to expect that the nest the buffer we put around a nest doesn't change a bird's behavior at all. So the adults continue to incubate the eggs or continue to feed the young regardless of the activity going on nearby, which is different from our O&M work, where if we have work that's only going to scare the birds off the nest for 15 minutes or even a half hour, if the weather conditions are good and everything, then we're not going to cause that nest to fail by doing our work. But on a large project, we're going to be expected to have buffers that maintain the natural behavior of breeding birds. So you got to start with pretty good sized buffers that you're sure are not going to alter that parental behavior, and then adjust it based on the local conditions. And so we use nesting bird management plans. We have a template that we've developed that is been developed with Fish and Wildlife Service, the Bureau of Land Management, California Fish and Wildlife, like everybody was involved in it. And so it's a really robust plan, and it allows us a fair bit of flexibility, allows our avian biologists that have enough experience and have been approved for the project to manage those nests without having to go to the agencies with every buffer change they want to make. So even when we don't have one that's, we don't have a project that requires a nesting bird management plan, we'll still have one internally to use. And those plans will include standard buffers that are based on groups of species. We'll have, you know, a buffer for eagles, a buffer for wading birds, buffer for waterfowl, etc. And then a process that you go through to reduce a buffer, and the methodology that's going to be used for how you survey an area, looking for nests, how you monitor the nests, how long you monitor the nests, all of it's laid out in there, as well as how we're going to report our findings to the agencies involved in a project. And that's just an example of what a buffer can look like around a nest in a tower for helicopters flying in a project area.
Cara, how much do you have to customize from your template for each project?
So not a lot. We actually have very little language in our template that gets modified to a project at this point. It's pretty much just the project description. There might be some changes of bird species that are included in the table of buffers, but overall, we really have got it dialed in that our template works for almost all our projects as is.
Nice, really nice.
And that's actually all that I had put together for slides, because I figured there'd be plenty of questions.
I'll start with my questions, and then Rini, if you want to read I know we've got one question in there.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm still confused if I'm going to stop sharing so we can see everyone here.
Sure.
I'll have to stop sharing, actually.
Yeah.
So I'm still, okay, if the whole point is no take, then what do the buffers matter other than a guideline? If you don't take, can you still work inside the buffers?
So it depends. For us on O&M projects, then yes, we absolutely can do that. But on a big project, so like our large capital transmission projects, we have oversight from the California Public Utilities Commission. And so they have very specific things that they are expecting us to do, and they've only approved that plan because they feel comfortable with the buffers we've laid out in the plan and the process that we've put in place. And so we are allowed to change those buffers following the process in the plan, but it's going to get questioned if we're reducing our buffers so much that we're causing birds to stop incubating, stop feeding their young while we do our work. Right. So that is all in the reporting, is the behavior of the birds within a reduced buffer.
That makes sense. Could you explain or outline for our audience the buffer reduction process you go through? Like when you're requesting a buffer reduction, how you designed that?
Sure. So the request comes from the construction contractor. They're the ones they've got the maps that we've given them, showing them where nests are and where they can't work, and they'll come to the avian biologist for the project and outline all of the work that they want to do and what buffer they need it reduced to in order to accomplish that work in that area. How long it's going to take, all those things that I told you are considerations for our O&M work, how long it will take, what tools are going to be used, like how big is the crew, etc. That's all given to the avian biologist to review and look at what the species is and how tolerant they've been up until now. And so then if the avian biologist feels comfortable with that buffer reduction, then they will notify the agencies, and this is assuming this is a project that requires this, but they'll notify the agencies. The agencies will have 24 hours to come back with any concerns or comments they have. And if there's no response, then the buffer reduction is put in place temporarily. The work occurs, and as soon as the work is done, it goes back to the original buffer.
Okay, great. Rini, we've got some questions queued up.
Yeah, we have some questions coming in. I'm going to take them in reverse order because just to the relevance of what we've been talking about. So Robert Shreve just asked, what agencies do you coordinate with to establish your BMPs? And do you have agreements with the standard BMP? So
for that large capital project, nesting bird management plan, I mentioned California Public Utilities Commission. That's the agency that regulates electric utilities like us and PG&E and SDG&E and whatever investor-owned utility is in your state. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, as well as California Fish and Wildlife Service. And then if you have any public lands that you cross, so U.S. Forest Service, BLM, National Park Service, they'll all want to be involved in approval of that plan as well. If it's an O&M project, SC has an internal avian protection plan that we have shared with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, but it's a voluntary plan. It's not something that they approve of. It's just something that they're aware we have and know what it contains. And as long as we don't have take, they have no real reason to question how we're managing nesting birds. So yeah, a lot of what we do has to do with what other utilities do as well. The Avian Powerline Interaction Committee, we all work together on what our best management practices are and how you fix these different kinds of problems. And Fish and Wildlife Service is a member of APLIC, so is Bureau of Land Management. Forest Service isn't yet, but we'd like them to be, so yeah.
Great, thank you. I tried to capture all that, not sure if I did, but I'm going to send the answer anyway, so it's recorded. Then Chris Garza, our very own Chris Garza, do these survey/buffer standards and regulatory constraints apply to non-utility projects? For example, general land development projects that require the removal of trees?
Right, so we do a lot of tree removal as well. We have lots of hazard trees in our area from drought conditions and fires that could fall into our lines. And so there is nothing in the MBTA, there's nothing in our California regulations, probably nothing in any state regulations or federal regulations related to nesting birds that tells you what the buffer needs to be for a bird. That is, all those regulations tell you is thou shalt not kill birds. And so you have to figure it out from there. And if you're not being directly regulated with an environmental document, environmental permit, then it's completely up to you to figure out how to prevent take. And so that's why it's great to have groups like APLIC or other industry groups that talk to each other about how to do these things and the best way to prevent compliance issues with MBTA.
Yeah, thank you. Lots of good questions. David Lee asks, the MBTA was changed to be less stringent during the Trump administration. Have there been any changes in the Biden administration with regard to the MBTA take?
Yeah, MBTA, for those of us that are bird nerds, has been a soap opera for the last several years. Under the Trump administration, so right before the Trump administration, Obama administration had what's called a solicitor's opinion that came out addressing MBTA and stating that MBTA protected birds from incidental take. As soon as the Trump administration came in, that opinion was rescinded, and they came out with their own solicitor's opinion that said MBTA does not apply to incidental take. And then they also tried to, they went the regulatory route and tried to put it in the code that MBTA does not apply to incidental take by doing a Federal Register process that I won't spend too much time on, but if you follow these things, it was posted in the Federal Register as a proposed rule, and it was finalized towards the end of the Trump administration. Then the Biden administration came in. And this is normal. Every new administration will review the last administration's final rules and things like that. And so that final rule is now in the process of being rescinded under the current administration. It's expected that process is expected to be completed by the end, or by probably the end of the year, maybe sometime in the fall. And Fish and Wildlife Service has been tasked with developing a permit program that would be for incidental take. So a company like Edison could apply for a incidental take permit under MBTA. So I think I remembered it all, but
that was good.
Nice job.
Yeah, it's a little bit of an emotional whiplash, it seems.
There's
It's
questions in
crazy.
chat. There's questions in chat too, Rini.
Well,
Yeah,
let's
I'm
get to
looking at the
Caesar's
time.
question. Let's get to Caesar's question. That was the first one in
Okay.
Q&A.
Okay, so Caesar asked about 20 minutes ago, has there been any hurdles with removing raven nests in the Mojave Desert in regards to the MBTA? Our interest is in preventing problematic ravens from expanding into the desert tortoise habitat, but there's no streamlined process. Well, not that I know of. So we heard about this recently from somebody else, didn't we, Nancy? They call them little meaty
Meat snacks,
Tidbits.
the desert
Meat
tourists
snacks,
meat
yeah.
snacks for the
baby turtles.
for the baby turtles, unfortunately.
this could be a whole nother lunch and learn topic. Yeah, ravens. So there isn't. Ravens are protected by MBTA, and in a large transmission project out in the desert, we have to protect them in our nesting bird management plan, just like every other bird on the project. However, on those same projects, we also have, as a part of usually we have to get a take permit for desert tortoise on those projects, just in case, it's possible that we could run one over, or we are just disturbing habitat, and so we have to get a take permit for tortoises. And as a part of that, we have to develop a raven management plan, so after the project goes into O&M, we then have to remove raven nests that we were protecting during the project. It's all kind of crazy. However, we don't have a permit to remove raven nests that have eggs or chicks. So we would only be removing them after they've completed nesting. So now we've in recent years been working with other groups on other techniques to try and manage ravens for desert tortoise. And one of those is this company has developed a drone that can fly over raven nests and spray the eggs with oil. Which is a technique used on geese pretty often when there's problem geese on golf courses and such. So spraying the eggs with oil, the eggs will then die, but the birds don't realize that the eggs are dead until well after the point when they would have hatched, and so they've run out of time to re-nest and produce young that year. And so that's a technique that's being pretty commonly used in the desert right now, and I think they're trying it out for sage grouse up north in sage grouse country as well. So yeah, the raven problem, they're smarter than us.
Yeah,
They are very smart.
I've got a raven on my arm.
Ah,
Kristen loves
nice.
the ravens.
I have a couple more
I
questions.
love them.
I love I know we're running late. There's a couple more questions I think are really good. So if you guys can stick around with us. Cara, what happens when a chick falls out of the nest or other injury, death during work? How do the agencies determine whether it was take caused by the work rather than coincidence?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think that usually I'm the one that's doing the analysis of whether or not it happened. And my relationship with Fish and Wildlife Service is so important that I maintain it and keep like a level of trust there that if I think that we caused it, I'm going to tell them that we caused it. Like that trust is way more important than us causing a nest to fail. Mm-hmm. So that happens every year that I have to report nests where we made a mistake and caused a nest to fail. And the important part is that what are we going to do to prevent that from happening the next time? What did we do wrong the first time? And how can we keep that from happening again?
And that actually leads to my question I wanted to ask, which is what are the consequences of take?
Right. So it depends. That's part of why it's so important to maintain a good relationship. If Edison was untrustworthy, there would be a good reason for Fish and Wildlife Service law enforcement to use those instances to build a case against us and prosecute us and either force us into a settlement agreement or whatever. It could be, if they have a big enough case, the fines can end up in the millions, and the reputational damage is huge.
Right.
So if you look at any one individual instance of an MBTA violation, it might be $1,000. But if you build a case up of this happening and you add in eagles that have higher protections and things like that, it becomes a big deal. And it's much bigger for a business than it is for an individual person.
Right.
So.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we're going to have to move along on this. Thank
Kristen,
you.
Can I do a public service announcements? Somebody put in the chat, Pat Jackson, that there is an upcoming Raven management workshop. So if you didn't catch that in the chat, I suggest people go ahead and click on that. It looks really interesting to me.
You can save the chat by clicking on the three dots and then click save chat. And that will give you those links for later too, if you would like.
Okay.
And okay, so usually we end our segment with Kristen's crazy ideas, but we've got Cara. So Cara's crazy ideas. What's sort of a thinking crazy idea that you've got around potentially technology and improving the point, which is protecting the birds?
Right. Yeah. So I think that with all of this work we're doing out there, and we're collecting so much data on so many different species of birds and so many different circumstances, whether it's the habitat or the weather or the type of work being performed, the size of the buffer that ends up being used. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of these data points that could be used if they're collected in something like, sorry, my dog's about to knock over my water. could be used, something like Wildnote could be used to pull all that information together and start looking at where we're doing this right and where we're doing it wrong, and what could, right now we're just kind of guessing each circumstance individually, but perhaps a program like that could bring all that different information together and help you make a decision more efficiently.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it'd be really great if we had a free flow of information across any data collection mechanism, so we could analyze that when the take happens, what the buffers were there buffer reductions? Is that kind of what you're thinking? Like those sorts of attributes? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, one day, I bet in the not too distant future. So yeah, that's the end of the segments then. I will end the poll, which I think Rini can see. Is that right?
Once you end it, I should be able to see it. That's right.
I have ended it. Oh, share results.
Oh, there it is. Popped right up. Okay. First question, what most motivated you to attend today's webinar? Cara, I don't think you should take this personally. You get 14%, and the topic itself, which you know so much about, got 93%. And then Wildnote got 2%. So we won't take it personally either. Next question. Which aspects of today's topic is your primary interest? And this was pretty evenly spread across. Migratory birds took first place at 70%. These numbers don't add up. I don't know how that works.
It's because multi-select.
Multi-select. Okay. And then in the 50s range was construction monitoring, regulations, and compliance methodology. And then at 15% was interest in technology.
We won't take that personally either.
Like water off a duck's back. Okay. Which roles describe you best? Who's
the winner?
What's that?
Project manager wins on that one. We don't have to read them all. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah. So we got pretty close tie with project managers and consultants, and then the rest are somewhere lower than that. And did you want to? Most people heard about this from a colleague forwarding it. So thank you for sharing the link and just the goodwill and knowledge.
Yeah, this has been one of our most successful in terms of attendance as well as signups. So seems that there is some interest in learning more. And let me just share my screen again. So share, go to here. Okay, so thank you very much, Cara, for your being so generous with your time and teaching us more about the compliance with the MBTA. Our next webinar is really, we're going to focus on how are environmental consulting executives going to take advantage of the coming boom when there is a shortage of qualified staff and companies are all competing for the same people. So,
$1 trillion approved today.
Hint, 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 technology. Okay, so
spoiler.
And then we're going to do the next one after that will be a focus on restoration. And then now we've got Nancy Douglas, who's going to stick around for the demo. She will show you how we support construction compliance.
Theoretically, only 2% of the people should be sticking around.
Exactly.
All right. Thanks, Kristen, very much. And Cara, thank you so much for jumping on, and thank you to Edison for letting you do that. It's it's great. So really appreciate it. So
thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, wonderful. So a quick 10-minute overview of the Wildnote platform. We are geared towards environmental compliance of all sorts and types. It's a platform, as Kristen mentioned, very extendable. It's comprised of 2 parts. Web app, which is what you're seeing right now on your screen with these project cards, and then a corresponding app that you can download onto your iOS or Android devices that will work offline for your field data collection initiatives. So we understand that the work that folks like you do is very project-based, and so we've built our platform around the concept of a project. Like I said, these are project cards, kind of generic wetland, construction, environmental compliance, species exports. Are companies that use Wildnote, a lot of consulting companies, a lot of construction compliance going on, a lot of folks using us for nesting bird tracking. And so I just wanted to sort of give you a little bit of a glimpse into that. So within the platform, there's a setup, including the ability to ascribe taxonomy favorites. We have a very robust taxon framework, including the ABA bird list, which you can work into any of your nesting bird surveys. We also have a survey form library that you can grab from, which does include a nesting bird survey form that you can take and modify to suit your needs. This is our library that you can see the categories that we have here. These top categories: bio, compliance for construction monitoring, pre-construction, photo management, and remediation and restoration of wetland down here, and as well as cultural resources. So kind of cover the whole gamut. Under bio, we are a company based out of San Luis Obispo, California. So we started here, and so you'll see that a lot of our threatened and endangered species surveys are based on species that are here in California, but you can build anything that you want within the platform because it's very flexible. So you can see there's the nesting survey there. You would just copy that into your project and then modify it if you need to make modifications to that for your purposes. And then that becomes a part of your company library. You can see here that you can build your own forms as well. We have some other great aspects of the platform, and if you're interested in a deeper dive, you can definitely contact us for a full tour. Let me show you what the mobile app looks like. Oh, we went to sleep, of course, that happens. Okay, so sorry here, folks. On a second ago, there we go. Okay. All right, so this is my iPad. You can see the same projects here that were on the projects list behind me, and let's just have a look at this environmental construction compliance project. And there's the nest survey there, and I'll open one that I just put some preliminary information in. So one of the nice things that you can do if you are doing nesting bird surveys on a construction project is you can dynamically name those as you're out in the field. So if you're doing, you know, if you're cruising along and you're checking for nests, you can create those nests along with capturing the lat long of the nest right then and there with the application. So you can see that I have a nest ID here. And then this particular form covers location, nest location questions, nest status, and there's a lot of trigger questions as well that you're not seeing here. So for example, if a male was observed, if I change this answer to yes right now, you'll see some additional questions pop up on what the male observations would include. You can see the female observed there, and then buffer details, the ever important buffer details. So we have some companies that have gone as far as to use our tool to auto-populate buffers based on what species is selected from the list. So you can build in those kinds of really cool things that make your life a lot easier when you're in the field. So if you do know what your standard buffers are for the various species you're anticipating finding on a construction site, you can build that right into your form. You can also export just the buffer. If you have to have a buffer reduction, you can just export those details and then make a report that's just based on that to ship off to whoever your regulatory authorities are for the project you're working on. So that brings me back over to the project data side of things. So you can come in and view all of your data that's been collected here, and then you can export this data in a variety of formats. I think we have about 13 different export types now, including just a standard survey PDF, which is a great report. I have an example of that up here. So here's just your standard PDF. This is the nest report that I was just showing you on the tablet. And like I said, you can tag questions and just export buffer information or any piece of this that you want to for different authorities. So we have that. We've got a pivot export. Here's an example of that. This is actually a specialized pivot export called a species export. So if you're working on a project and you just need to grab all of the species for plants and animals across all of the different survey form templates and data collected for a project, you can use our species export. And we'll include the metadata if we have it for listing status, et cetera, invasive status for plants, and then wildlife list over here. So this is a great way to get all of your species information out. And then this example of what our normal pivot table would look like as well. So you can pivot your data out. In addition to that, we have, let's see here, something that we call the narrative summary report, which allows you to Cara was mentioning, you know, reporting out to the CPUC. It allows you to report out to the regulators as often as you need to, but maybe you need to do a weekly summary or a monthly summary. You can query the database for information, and then that can feed your report that you send out. So this is an example of what that report looks like that's generated out of the product, including a compliance checklist. If you have set up your questions correctly, you can access this great compliance checklist, which runs a little algorithm over the time period that you put in as to whether or not you're in compliance or not in compliance with your different measures. And then images are included as well, and you can choose what's included with that. So there's one of those unusual places that a nest is found, right in the construction equipment. So that, in addition to that, we've got a great gallery view. So photo management can become very important on these kinds of projects. And so we have this gallery view, which allows you to see all the photos. You can search by caption, coming soon, search by location, which means you can gather up all of your nest, you know, photos for one particular nest, you can go right to the data sheets that these came from, these surveys that these came from. So there's great, robust photo management, and then really good post QA/QC opportunities as well with things like search and editable grid. So a very flexible platform that can be utilized for the work that you folks do, and we're here to support that effort. And I know Renee would love to talk with anybody who's interested in learning if it's the right tool for gaining some extra efficiencies for this upcoming boom. $1 trillion, it's a unfathomable amount of money going to infrastructure. You guys are going to be busy. So
Nancy,
yeah.
Nancy, can you export the nest points as a KMZ?
Yes, you sure can.
That was from Stephen Peterson. Great.
Right on.
All right. Well, thank you, Cara, for answering the questions while Nancy was talking. That worked out good.
Yeah. Oh, good. I'm glad that happened.
Yeah,
Great.
they were still coming through. So that was awesome. And we really appreciate everyone attending. And we hope you have a wonderful week and month. And we'll see you again next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
So much. Thank you, Cara.
Take care.
Bye.